Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Business Key podcast with Debbie and Ochiko. So, on today's podcast, we will be talking about a major retailer who's closing some of its depots and shrinkflation. So, for our first story, over to you, Ochiko.
Hello, everyone. Recently, there was a story that Argos had announced that they were going to close 2 depots, and that would put 1,400 jobs at risk. Just for those that don't know, so Argos is a general goods retailer. So they sell lots of things around the house. So stuff like tables, furniture, electrical items, TVs, etc. But also gardenware as well. What they don't sell is food. So like groceries and so on. They don't sell that, but pretty much things around the house. They've got almost everything. So yeah, so this is a big deal. So at the moment, so for those that don't know, about 7 years ago, so 2016, Argos was bought out for 1.6 billion by Sainsburys. So Sainsburys in the UK is a supermarket, one of the major supermarkets in the UK. So yeah, so this is like a major news in the UK, and also like for those that don't know as well, Argos has been like a staple of the high street for many years. It's quite hard to actually imagine a high street without Argos. Argos 3 years have always been pretty much almost every major town that we've had at Argos. But as years have gone by, they have started to close the Argos stores, and then this eventually led to the takeover by Sainsbury's. This was like a precursor. But I suppose one of the questions that as me and Debbie were discussing, one of the questions that came to mind was, what's happened to Argos? How have they progressed up to now? What could have been different? But also, like, has the integration of Argos into Sainsbury's been effective? So I think we'll start there. Has the integration of Argos into Sainsbury's been effective?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Argos have closed a lot of their standalone stores that they had on the high street. And in many instances, where there are quite large Sainsbury's stores, there has been a space carved out for an Argos counter. And therefore, Argos has been integrated into Sainsbury's, not just, by, Sainsbury's being the parent company of Argos, sort of on paper, but very visibly to customers. Because if you were to go into a large Sainsbury's store, you can see an Argos there. In terms of how has that integration gone, I think it's probably been successful in some instances, in terms of extending Argos's network in some regards. So although Argos has been integrated into larger stores physically in terms of having a physical presence, I do believe you can, if you do an online purchase at Argos, you can deliver your items, I guess depending on how large it is, you can deliver them to Sainsbury's stores of any size. So even if you have a very small Sainsbury's, you can still deliver your items there. And although there were many Argoses on major high streets, there's probably a lot more Sainsbury's stores on more local high streets. So in that regard, it sort of expanded Argos's reach and its network. If people are aware of Argos's association with Sainsbury's now, it means that they're able to utilize that distribution network and perhaps consolidate some of their delivery logistics. Yes. What are your thoughts on the integration?
It seemed to be an interesting idea at the time. Of course, Sainsbury's is in many, like you said, it's got like a massive footprint in terms of the places that it is, and it's quite a big supermarket. So it did have the retail space. So I suppose it made sense in terms of utilizing that space. I imagine they would have saved, like Argos would have saved money on rent. So it sort of made sense from that perspective, what they were thinking. But I think in terms of the execution, I think Argos, if I think to the instances when I've gone into Sainsbury's, Argos tends to be like towards the corner of the store. And it's not really, a lot of the times as well, I feel like, unless you've gone inside specifically to look for Argos, I don't feel like it's maybe in a prominent position that you'll be like, oh, there's Argos. It feels a bit like it's in the back corner, a bit looking a bit sorry in the back corner. I don't know if you had that same impression as well.
I have had that same experience. I think, as you mentioned, if you are going into a Sainsbury's because you know there is an Argos there, then it's fine. You'll probably be able to locate it. But if you are going to Sainsbury's just for your general shopping, you may miss that there is also an Argos present. Yes, I agree. If you were going into a Sainsbury's because you knew it had an Argos present, then it would most likely be fine in terms of locating the Argos counter or the Argos section of the store. However, if you were just going to Sainsbury's to do your general shopping, you may miss the fact that there is also an Argos counter there. So, in terms of that cross selling opportunity, which is presumably one of the reasons why Sainsbury's decided to integrate Argos into their stores, it perhaps hasn't been executed to the fullest effect that it could have been, as you mentioned.
Yes, absolutely. And so I think that's one point. So I think one point is certainly the positioning hasn't been, perhaps isn't the best. I think the marketing as well could have been could be looked at as well. I don't think it's been really. I mean, I'm aware that Sainsbury's have been taken over by Argos, but I'm not sure that that's common knowledge for everyone in the public. I'm not sure that Sainsbury's really did like some kind of maybe like campaign or really shouted about the fact that that there are Argos stores in Sainsbury's, and that is somewhere that people can get their general purpose of that. I don't know if you feel.
I think I would argue that they probably did do a good job in terms of highlighting it when it first happened. But I think perhaps Sainsbury's wanted to keep the two as two distinctive brands. And perhaps as a result, that is the reason why they've not mentioned it as much in terms of linking the two. As I mentioned, if you are to order from Argos, I think you will see Sainsbury's stores available for pickup of your order. So in that regard, it is reinforcing the fact that they are integrated, but you have to actually have gone onto the Argos website and gone through the process before you get to that stage. I don't think it's clear when you go on the Argos website or on the Sainsbury's website at first glance that the two are integrated. So I don't think they have continued or sustained any sort of branding or marketing of the two together. I think perhaps their thinking was, let's keep them as two distinctive brands. They're both long established UK brands. Let's keep them that way. But as you said, perhaps they've missed the mark there. Whereas if they had, done some clever marketing or advertising, they could have leveraged their integration in a bit more of a profitable way.
And then the next point I wanted to talk about was just in general. So with Argos, so just in case for those that don't know, so Argos is like they have a catalog model. So what happens is before in the generation before the internet, they produced a catalog, like a physical catalog of items that they were selling, and they would distribute that. So then the idea was people would then have an idea of what they wanted. They can see the prices, and then they can come into store and then order what they wanted. But as time has gone on, as the internet has got better, they've dispensed with the catalog a few years ago, and then when you go inside, they have physical terminals that you can enter your information into to search for items, etc. But as time has gone on, I feel like there has been some things that they were doing that was certainly I think it was one of the first. For example, I certainly remember a few years ago them being one of the first that if you need an item, you can look online to see which store has the item. So that saves you from going over. Let's say you're going over to your local Argos and they don't have it, then you're disappointed. You have to go somewhere else. Actually, from home, you could find out whether or not which Argos had your item in stock. So I think they were probably one of the pioneers, one of the first to bring that kind of technology, or that kind of, whatever you call it, technology, or that kind of operation in terms of execution to the market. But since then, I haven't really seen much innovation, and I do wonder, and I think that when I look at Argos, I actually think that they're quite similar if you look at what they're selling, it's quite similar in some ways to Amazon. So they could in theory be, I mean, online already. If you order online, they do have same day delivery, even like a really fast service. So it looks like they've started. So it looks like they've started to in the last few years started to really get to grips in terms of online delivery and so on. But I don't know. I suppose that's the question. How come they haven't been able to compete as much as Amazon? Because it feels as if you're looking for a new product, I think Amazon's probably like the first place one would go to. So how come Argos isn't? How come we're not thinking Amazon or Argos? Why is it Amazon first? Why has Argos not been able to compete as much as Amazon? Because they're selling pretty much the same things.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. But I think it probably speaks to the strategic direction that Argos has taken over the years. I think, as you mentioned, they have been innovative in certain areas, but perhaps they've been quite stagnant in others. I think with their physical catalogue, I mean, I remember growing up and getting an Argos catalogue was a really exciting feat because, in addition to having homeware and electricals, they also had toys and they had jewellery. It was like a great sort of way to explore a lot of different items in one place. Sort of like how the internet gives you the opportunity in one place to see a whole lot of products and look at the specification of the products, compare them to other products. The Argos catalogue gave you that same opportunity. I think perhaps with the Argos model in the past, as you said, before the internet or before e-retailers became more as prominent as they are now, having the physical catalogue in your home perhaps then did make Argos, the Amazon of its day. It did make Argos the first port of call. If you wanted to buy toys or homeware or electricals, you would look first in the Argos catalogue. That would almost be your reference point to the high street. As you said, more people have moved to digital, and perhaps Argos might have been a little bit slow in that same regard. I think also with their catalogue, as you mentioned, the catalogue actually had prices printed in there. And I think the catalogue would be released twice a year, which meant that Argos was not able to be as dynamic as its online competitors are, in which they can raise and lower the cost or the price of their items whenever they want at a whim. Whereas with Argos, they had to stick with a set price for their items and also stick with a set offering as well. So if there was a new phone or a new, printer that came out, whereas with the emergence of online shopping, you were able to see that item on an Amazon or on another company's website. You would not be able to perhaps see that on Argos because they had their set list, for the next 6 months at a set price. So I think the fact that they phased out their catalogue is probably a better thing because they can be more dynamic in terms of their product offering and their pricing. However, it just seems as though maybe the marketing and the branding hasn't sort of kept up to pace with, what else is out there. And therefore, I just think they've been slow and quite reactive as opposed to being proactive and innovative. And as you mentioned, oftentimes when you're thinking to buy an item that you can probably get in Argos, your first port of call will probably be Amazon because Amazon is seen as more, current. They will have everything. They will have a range of options and a range of pricing. Whereas maybe Argos, you're sort of thinking, oh, they might have a limited range and, perhaps it's a bit more of an old school website, or old school, retailer. Whereas Amazon seems a little bit more fresh. So perhaps there's something to be said with regards to the marketing and the branding that Argos needs to do to kind of, let's not think of Argos as the catalogue retailer of old, but think of it as a modern retailer where you can get a lot of items at a really good range of prices and a really good range of options. I think they have a bit of work to do there in order to dispel their old sort of, their reputation and perhaps provide more of a more modern, innovative one.
So that's a good point, actually. Yeah, in terms of customer perception, because like you said, they've always been perceived as the catalogue retailer. So I suppose maybe changing that perception to being actually an online retailer would make sense.
I don't know, but I have a question for you. Okay, so I have a question for you then. So we have seen in recent times some retailers, for example, where they've had a particular reputation that they wanted to dispel, they've rebranded and changed their name. Argos has a long heritage. It was on the high street for many years. Many of us had the catalogue in our homes. but as you said, it could be the competitor to Amazon. Do you think as part of this, push, if they wanted to make this push, which we think they're capable of doing, do you think maybe changing their name would help, or would you say that would perhaps lose some goodwill that they already had? What would you advise them to do?
I would say that no. I think keeping the name. I think Argos is one of like the UK staples. So I think keeping the name would make sense. Maybe they might want to add to the name. Maybe it might be Argos like Direct or Argos Online or something like that to kind of
Subtly signal.
yeah, that they're online. So maybe something like that. Maybe like an addition. But I wouldn't get rid of it. It's still a well-known name. It's still a well-known brand. It's more just changing that perception that actually we have everything online too. And I think the other point I was going to make as well is just in terms of, do you agree with that, or do you think?
I think it's a great idea. Yeah, Argos Online, Argos Direct, Argos Digital. Yeah, something to add a modern touch to it, and that would also even drive more news reports and drive more interest. And yeah, maybe like a refresh that in that way, but you don't have to strip away the name, that it's the legacy that is built up, because that does have good standing with a lot of people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I mean, they're already selling, all the stuff that most of the stuff that Amazon's selling. Of course, Argos has been selling for years, so they already have like relationships with the distributors and wholesalers and so on. So there's really no reason why they couldn't open up. They already have depots, so there's no reason why they couldn't, send over goods to do home delivery, not even bypassing the stores, but to do home delivery straight to customers. They could do that. They could do that too. I see no reason why not. The only thing I would say is that with Amazon, of course, they have the Amazon Prime deal, which is gives customers unlimited orders if they pay a certain amount. So, sorry, unlimited next day delivery. That would be something, because Argos do charge for the deliveries at the moment. I believe it's around £5 or £6. Might depend on the amounts, but I believe it's around £5 or £6. So yeah. So at the moment, I mean, if you have that choice between paying £5 or £6 or effectively free delivery, that would be maybe a no-brainer for the customer. So that's probably something. But I mean, that could be easily done in terms of creating an offering. But I suppose maybe trying to match, because with Amazon's offering, it's not just the delivery; it's also the added benefits like the Prime Video and so on. But I suppose you do see other stores like ASOS and so on, and they have a delivery like a premium model where you can pay a certain amount and then you get unlimited deliveries for the year. So
Yeah.
there's nothing stopping Argos from doing the same.
I think they should definitely do that. I think there's been loyalty schemes have been really successful, seemingly, for businesses, and Argos's parent Sainsbury's already has their loyalty card scheme with the Nectar card, and Nectar card doesn't just give you benefits with Sainsbury's stores. I think there's also benefits to fuel. There's also add-ons for other ventures as well. So I think they could easily just sort of integrate that feature into Nectar. So if you already have a Nectar card, just sign up, to this extension with Argos, and that then again builds in that, emphasizes to customers that integration of Sainsbury's and Argos that we were saying, perhaps maybe not as prominent, and also is a way to just expand the retailer's data on its customers, and also instill that loyalty. So where, as you said, if you have Amazon Prime, that might be a sort of something to incline you to shop at Amazon, because you might be able to get next day delivery or quite fast delivery. But if you have, this extension to the Nectar card, for example, that will also give you, very fast deliveries with Argos. That also is another way to position Argos as a major sort of online presence, an online retailer.
That's a good point, actually. So in terms of leveraging their Sainsbury's, because like you said, they've been operating so far as like separate brands. So this could be an opportunity for them to actually now to get those synergies. So all their Sainsbury's customers can know that, okay, they also can also shop from Argos. So I think that's It's a great idea.
Yeah, and I guess I just want to say, have we answered that question in terms of, the leading headline is that the Argos will be closing two of its large depots. Do we have a thought as to why that is? Obviously, we've spoken about perhaps what Argos could do to become a sort of maybe increase its brand awareness, maybe to appeal itself to more customers, and in that way it would generate more profits. But clearly, this move has been, a nod to reducing costs. As you mentioned, 1,400 jobs are at risk. There is a general trend with a lot of retailers of late, taking major decisions that you can be seen as cost cutting exercises. So generally speaking, it is the loss of jobs. But outside of just that, unless you think that is pretty much the only reason, what do you think are the reasons why Argos is closing its depots, or do you think it's all of the above that we've just discussed today?
I think I would imagine the main reason would be a cost-cutting exercise to cut costs. I would imagine perhaps the sales haven't been as high as they were expecting, so they've not. I mean, I don't have the exact numbers, but I would imagine that the profits aren't as high as they were expecting. So they decided to make like perhaps I would imagine perhaps maybe the other warehouses are being underutilized. So they're thinking, okay, since maybe it might be like 50% or 60%, for example. So maybe they're thinking actually we could consolidate the warehouses that we have and just use get the most out of the others and save money on these extra ones. Maybe they're not being utilized as much.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And also to note, Sainsbury's also did announce that in addition to closing two Argos depots, they are also going to, I think, vastly reduce their Habitat offering, which the Habitat is also one of Sainsbury's brands. And they have showrooms in many large Sainsbury's stores. What they're going to do instead is put these showrooms online.
Sorry, Debbie, just to interject. So, what do, just for some listeners that don't know, that I've not heard of Habitat, so what do they do exactly?
So Habitat are a home goods company. So they sell things like furniture, they sell things like bedding and linen, they sell lighting fixtures and decorations for the home. They also have cookware and things of that nature. They are also one of Sainsbury's brands. If you go to very large Sainsbury's stores, you can often see a Habitat sort of showroom of sorts where you can sort of pick up some items such as the cookware, and also of course if you wanted to purchase a larger item like a sofa or a bed, you can see it there in person, and then of course you can make a purchase and have make arrangements for the item to be delivered to your door. So of course, because they have furniture and large items, they do actually have physical showrooms in many large Sainsbury's stores. Sainsbury's have announced that they will be closing many of these down and instead having online showrooms, which essentially just sounds like they will be directing people to Habitat's existing website. And this also seems like a cost-cutting measure because there will also be costs that will be reduced from not having to maintain these items and deliver new items into the showroom, and not having specialist staff who are fully trained on these items on the premises. Another cost-cutting measure that Sainsbury's are also doing are also sort of, I think they're closing down one of their major offices, I think in the Milton Keynes region. So they're going to sort of emphasise home working for staff. And of course, in closing down their office, that means a reduction in the outlay that they will be paying for the hosting of their employees in that office, and the associated costs with that. So it definitely sounds like Sainsbury's are doing a large push to cut costs in many different ways across many different of their brands. And so we'll see how they fare over the next few months and what their results look like as a result of these measures, and how this impacts the consumer. And if they are maybe ahead of the curve in terms of what they are seeing with consumer spending, and perhaps their position is that for groceries, people will go into stores physically, but for other items, homeware, home goods, electricals, toys, people are happy to purchase these online, and therefore they're making a decision to, I guess, follow that strategy.
It's interesting though, because when I look at the range of items, it is quite. I mean, IKEA does sell a lot of these items as well, so that's interesting. I believe. I mean, I need to probably look into it, but when I've gone almost every time I've gone into IKEA, it's been the car park's been completely full, the shop's been full of people as well. So it would suggest that going in person to see showrooms and have a look at sofas and so on. It's still popular.
It may be popular, but is it so popular that we need one in every large Sainsbury's store? So there isn't an IKEA on every major high street. There are a few very large IKEAs where you can sort of consolidate your costs because you have all of these items in very few small locations. You can have your specialist staff there. You can have your very large stockroom spaces there. You can have your very large car park. Are people going into Sainsbury's often enough to purchase beds and wardrobes and cookware, or are they primarily going in there for groceries? Therefore, if the answer is they're mainly going in there for Sainsbury's, which it seems as though Sainsbury's is that's their strategy, or that's what they're believing, then maybe it does make sense to have perhaps less Habitat showrooms in Sainsbury's stores. Perhaps have a good, better online presence, online showroom, and maybe have fewer Habitat showrooms across the country.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think I would agree. I think I would imagine most people going into Sainsbury's just mainly go for the groceries. Also, I would also say I'm not sure that Habitat. Again, I'm not really sure they've shouted about it in terms of Habitat being in store. I mean, when I've gone round to the homeware, it's certainly not obvious that I'm in Habitat. I don't know if you feel the same, but it feels as if I'm just in another part of Sainsbury's. It doesn't feel like I've stepped into a new store. So I'm not sure the feeling of Habitat has been translated into the store in that way. It just feels like the homeware department.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And so I think we have presented sort of a consistent theme here with regards to Sainsbury's and how perhaps they market their brands, and some of our thoughts with regards to their most recent decisions. And we'd love for you guys to get involved in the conversation. Tell us what you think with regards to Argos closing some of its depots, regards to large Sainsbury's stores. Are you one of those people that love going into a Habitat showroom and love going to the Argos counter when you go to a large Sainsbury's, or do you barely notice it? How have you thought about Sainsbury's, integration or lack thereof of their brands? Do you think they could do a better job of it? And what do you think about Argos potentially being a competitor to Amazon? We'd love to know your thoughts. You can contact us on social media at the Business Key Pod.
So that brings us to our second theme for today. So do you want to take us through it?
Yes. So our second discussion point of today is a phenomenon that is sweeping the nation. It is probably something that you have noticed yourself naturally over time when you've purchased items. And that is what we call shrinkflation. So shrinkflation has become quite a standard, I would say, issue at this point, where you have a lot of manufacturers, particularly of food products, but potentially for food and drink products, but potentially also across other areas, are reducing the quantity of product that they are selling to consumers, but in the most part, keeping the prices the same. So, for example, whereas before you may have bought a packet of crisps, which may have been 150 grams as standard, and that might have cost you £1.50, for example. Now retailers are selling a bag of crisps with the same branding and packaging for perhaps 90 grams, but still for the same price point. And that is what we deem shrinkflation.
sorry to interject. I think you're being a bit generous with the 90 grams. It might be even 10 grams or 20 grams these days with all that air that's put into it. But yeah, sorry, as you were.
Yeah, no, and that's what I mean by you may have come across this naturally yourself, because I think we've often remarked when we've bought items, so particularly Chris, as you mentioned, realizing that half, sometimes even it seems as though 3/4 of the bag just seems to be air, and therefore, although you're buying a packet of a particular size, you're actually not getting that quantity of products. So to that point, then, so Chico, do you have any thoughts with regards to, I guess, the increase in this in terms of manufacturers, and also what do you think the consumer's reaction has been to this as well? Manufacturers doing it.
Yeah, so for me, generally, it has been, I've not liked it, of course. Certainly, we've noticed with the inflation, a lot of things, a lot of chocolates and so on going up in price. And then, the actual size of it is slowly creeping smaller, 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 smaller. So, no, not been a fan of it. But I suppose I'd prefer that to the taste changing, drastically changing, like for them to reduce the ingredients. So, I suppose, but how do you feel about it, Debbie?
Yeah, agreed. And so I think for manufacturers and retailers, of course, for them it's a benefit because you mentioned chocolate, but I think it's sweeping many different items. It can be flour, sugar, gravy, any sort of household item, food products. I think we're seeing shrinkflation in food and drink products. So I think for the manufacturers and retailers, it's great for them because they're able to reduce some of their costs, but then also still remain at a quite high profit margin, or perhaps increase their profit margin. So for them, I can definitely see why they're doing it and why it's become more prevalent. But as you said, as a consumer, it is quite disappointing when you're used to having a particular size item for a particular price, and now you realize you're getting less. And before you might have thought, am I going crazy? But actually, we have a lot of evidence to show that no, it is a real thing. Shrinkflation is real, especially when you see along broader product lines and product items. And actually, to that point, we actually have some pictures which we'll be posting to our social media channels where you can actually see in real time how the size of certain products has drastically reduced over time. So we want you to check that out on our social media platforms. And if you have any examples as well, feel free to tweet us or message us on Instagram. Share your pictures and your thoughts with regards to shrinkflation as well. This is definitely a topic that we will be keeping this is definitely a topic that we'll be keeping in mind, and we'll definitely be coming back to this topic in future podcasts. We just wanted to touch upon it briefly now because it is quite a key sort of cornerstone in terms of what we're seeing a lot of businesses sort of doing at the moment. But yeah, let us know if you have any thoughts. Message us. We'd love for you to sort of get the conversation started with regards to shrinkflation, because it's definitely a topic that we've discussed in many a time recently. So thank you all for listening. Make sure to follow us, rate us as well, and leave your comments. If you have any on wherever you listen to your podcast, if you have any comments or questions or suggestions for us, please feel free to contact us on social media. You can find all of our details in the show notes below. See you in our next episode.
See you. Bye.